Artemis Fowl was released onto Disney Plus on the 12th of June, and since then, it seems to have become the biggest target for critics since Cats. And much like Cats, a lot of the hatred seems to be coming from fans of the source material. Now, I've never read the books that this film was based on, and quite frankly, I wanted to see if it was a bad standalone movie on its own, which it most definitely was. But I did read the basic summary of the story on Wikipedia, and, well, comparing the two plots, I think it's safe to say it's not a good adaptation either. The film centres on Artemis Fowl Jr., a typical annoying child prodigy wise beyond their years, played by a kid who can't act. When his father goes missing, he receives a call from a mysterious shadowy figure with a distorted voice named Opal, claiming he needs to find her a super weapon called the Aculos and bring it to her or she'll kill his father. Okay, so I'm fairly certain it would have made a lot more sense for her to have kidnapped the child and demanded that the fully grown adult find and bring her the weapon, but okay. Artemis learns from his father's bodyguard Domovoy that the fairy stories his father was always eager to teach him are in fact real. So Artemis kidnaps a fairy named Holly as she's sneaking above ground to find out the truth about what happened to her dead father. Seeing she's been kidnapped, the leader of the fairy army, Commander Root, demands she be returned before the existence of fairies is revealed to humanity, and Artemis demands they give him the Aculos in exchange for her. Okay, so what's the problem here? Or rather, what are the problems? Because there are many. Well, first things first, this movie has a framing device. Now, have you ever watched a film where the comic relief character is explaining something that happens in flashback, but their explanation is kinda silly and what happens on screen reflects that? Well, imagine an entire movie made up of just a scene like that, but we're expected to take it seriously. The comic relief side character Mulch Diggums, who is hilariously a tall dwarf, is telling some interrogator what happened, and good God is his narration annoying. Not only does he have an aggravatingly growly voice, but he keeps over-explaining everything in a meager attempt to come across as quirky. The film does such a poor job of getting the characters across, and thinks that him gushing about them and how great they are is enough. As always, show, don't tell. Like, there's a completely useless character called Juliet, who is supposed to be Artemis's sidekick of sorts, but rather than actually showing her being introduced to him and properly interacting, Mulch just tells us who she is, and then we see her interacting with him clearly after they've gotten to know each other. I mean, come on, this is an opportunity to help us get to know this character by having her actually introduce herself properly to both our main character and the audience. Growly voiced dwarf exposition is not a substitute for that. The characters and their complete lack of any kind of development or personality are one of the big problems with this movie. About the only one who feels like an actual character is Holly, who actually has an introductory scene rather than awful exposition. We see her interacting with Mulch in a friendly manner, then going out to take out a troll that has escaped to the human world, before flying away to the place where her father disappeared in order to find out what really happened to him. Okay, so she actually has a goal and a personality. She's a rebellious but good-natured kid who wants to clear her father's name. The other characters, however, just don't work at all. Artemis is built up as some kind of super amazing special genius kid, but we don't really get to know him. The kid playing him is clearly an amateur who isn't ready for a role like this, and so isn't emoting enough and has very little chemistry with any of the cast. I don't want to blame this kid too much here, so let it be known that this criticism is being aimed at the casting director. From what I understand, in the first book, Artemis was effectively the villain, and honestly, when he's talking to Holly after he's kidnapped her, much in the way a villain would, this is about the only time he ever seems to have an actual personality. A sly, smug little brat with some kind of nefarious scheme up his sleeve. Except, in reality, his scheme isn't nefarious. He just wants to get to Opal. More on that later. Artemis has a bodyguard named Domovoy who, again, just doesn't get his character across well enough. Like, he's supposed to be a protective guardian type, but what exactly is his relationship with Artemis? How well do they know each other? And how much does he know about fairies exactly? He is effectively nothing more than just a generic servant there to follow Artemis's orders, which becomes a little problematic when you consider this character was apparently Eurasian in the books, but has now been turned into a black character. Yeah. Then, of course, there's Mulch, the annoying comic relief. His humour is incredibly awkward, and he as a character is completely charmless. He's clearly trying to be the awkward but quirky, lovable goofball type, but there's just nothing to like about this character. While he is, unlike many bad comic relief characters, useful to a degree, unfortunately his powers involve grotesquely unhinging his jaw to eat and tunnel through dirt, and opening locks with his prehensile nose hair. So yeah, turns out this already charmless character is also completely repulsive to watch. But perhaps the most disappointing character of the bunch is the villain, Opal. When she's first introduced, she's hiding in the shadows, so we can't see her face, we can only hear her distorted voice. Her silhouette makes her look like she's wearing a hoodie, which isn't exactly intimidating, but I was willing to let it slide because I was expecting some kind of big reveal as to who she is and what she really looks like. But guess what? We don't get to find out either of those things. The most we find out about this character is that, according to Artemis Fowl Sr.'s journal, she was a great fairy who had gone to the bad. Seriously, that's literally the phrasing they used. No explanation as to how she was great, or what turned her evil, or how they knew each other, or even who she is. The most we get from her is that she wants to take over the human world because humans used to hate fairies and now they think of them as silly stories. The entire movie, I was waiting for the reveal. The reveal as to why she's only ever shown in the shadows. At first, I assumed she was going to be a typical surprise villain and be revealed as one of the established characters in disguise. But when that became unlikely, I at least expected that they'd reveal her face, or I don't know, maybe show that she has some kind of horrific burn or scar that was given to her by a human, which led to her turning against them. But no. We literally never see what she looks like, nor do we find out who she is. Opal is honestly one of the worst executions of a villain who stays in the shadows trope that I have ever seen. Not only is she not intimidating, not only is the mystery left far too unsolved for it to be interesting, but you know how a lot of secretive, shadowy villains at least have henchpeople to take on the heroes and act as a proto-antagonist? Well, turns out she does have a random mole in the elf army, but he comes across as so snivelling and pompous that you'd think he was meant to be an over-the-top parody of General Hux. And on top of Opal's backstory being completely forgotten about and glossed over, I had a lot of problems with just how underdeveloped and unexplained the fairy world was. While it is at least better designed than Bright, it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not only do we barely see any of it outside of the prison and the elf cop headquarters, but exactly why they went underground is a bit of a head scratcher. See, the elf police are really hell-bent on never ever letting humans discover their existence. And I have to ask, why? First off, what is the real history between humans and fairies? Second, why are they worried about humans discovering them when the fairies are clearly much more technologically advanced with devices that can stop time and super regeneration magic? Not only that, but they also have a super weapon that could not only potentially wipe out humanity, but can literally only ever be used by a fairy. I mean, I'm pretty sure the fairies would win in a fight with humans here. All the way through the movie, I was expecting it to be revealed that the fairies, I don't know, once went to war with the humans and then signed some kind of ancient magical deal to never invade their world again that would cause some kind of catastrophe if it was broken, and that's why the elf police are so dedicated to stopping it from happening. But no, we're just expected to believe that this much more technologically advanced race with literal magic powers is afraid of humans. And then there's Artemis's plan. So Artemis kidnaps Holly in order to lure in the elf army, then demands they give him the Aculos, otherwise he'll reveal the existence of fairies to the world. Except, why doesn't he just tell them that his father has been kidnapped by Opal and he needs to rescue him? Given Opal is only really shown as some random rogue, why couldn't he just warn the army that she was trying to steal the Aculos and had kidnapped his father as ransom? All the movie needed was some kind of explanation here. Have a brief line from the father's journal mentioning that Opal has spies everywhere, so he can't trust the army or something. The problem here is not just that it makes no sense, but that it completely diverts the story from the original goal. The film establishes Opal as the villain, and rescuing Artemis Sr. as the goal. But the vast majority of the plot is dedicated to fighting and negotiating with the elf army, who have absolutely nothing to do with Opal, aside from budget General Hux being there. So while we're expecting it to end the way it was set up, with a big showdown against the established villain, this just doesn't happen. Instead, they just randomly find the Aculos. Holly uses its completely vague and undefined powers to magically teleport Artemis Sr. back, and just like that, Opal's plans are foiled. The film is so dedicated to what, by all accounts, should just be the second act obstacle. The third act should be dedicated to the army and Artemis coming together to take out Opal. This movie practically doesn't have a third act. It's just a long, stretched out second act that ends with the villain being beaten in a completely underwhelming manner. Unlike Cats, which suffered from many issues but did have one big, clear, distressing problem that ruined the movie, Artemis Fowl just has so many endless problems that all get tangled up in a big, messy web. The awful narration, the lack of character development and interaction, so many things being unexplained, and its complete failure to deliver on the original setup. But if that's what went wrong, then how would I put it right then? Well, first, as I've said, I've not read the books, and it would probably be easy for me to just say, make a loyal adaptation, and call it a day. However, if I were to just look at this film as a standalone movie with many, many flaws to be fixed, well, here's what I would do. Get rid of the narration. Just open the movie up with Artemis growing up with his dad as he tells stories about fairies. Have them actually interact and build that relationship. Rather than desperately emphasizing how smart and special Artemis is, just show how he's absolutely mastered all of the knowledge of fairies, and while maybe he doesn't believe in the stories anymore, he still thinks Irish mythology is culturally important to know and to teach to others, actually making him seem mature. Have the fairies living underground be explained. Maybe suggest that they've always lived underground, and when they came above ground, their magic and tricks threatened humans, and eventually a war began. and humanity won by sheer numbers, given the fairy world seems relatively small. Show that the fairies signed a magical agreement to never again invade the human world under threat of catastrophe, or some kind of curse like that. Then, rather than having his father just vanishing, show him actually getting kidnapped by Opal's minions. That will actually be a serious shocking reveal to Artemis that fairies are real. Then have him seek out his father's journal after escaping from them, which reveals why his father knows about fairies. His father was perhaps the descendant of the humans who made the magic agreement, and that part of the deal was them being the fairies' only point of contact for the human world. You know, actually explain the mythos you're trying to create here. Then show a flashback where he goes to meet a fairy who's bringing him a warning and a message. Now, I think I read on the wiki that Opal in the books was some kind of weapon manufacturer. So yeah, have her be a famed scientist and weapon manufacturer who one day presented to the leader of the fairies, whoever that is, a weapon that could wipe out humanity, thus rendering their deal null and allowing them to live above ground again. But the leader was horrified and refused to allow such a weapon to be used, and then the weapon, which I guess was impossible to destroy, was locked away and never spoken about again. But now, after many years, Opal has built up a network of spies and moles who are looking to take it back. The fairy explains this to Artemis Sr., then reveals he himself has taken the weapon and wants to hide it in the human world. However, after they do so, Opal finds them and kills the fairy, with Artemis Sr. narrowly escaping. We then see the fairy world where Holly is going about her everyday life, actually showing us how average everyday life works in the fairy world, and she gets an assignment from Commander Root to go out and find the fairies spotted above ground in the Fowl's mansion. Holly goes above ground only to be kidnapped by Artemis like in the movie. Artemis doesn't trust her because she can't prove she isn't working for Opal. He tries to interrogate her about the fairy who Opal killed, and it dawns upon her that it was her father who, rather than being a branded traitor in this version, was simply missing in action instead. Realising what her father was doing, she agrees to help Artemis. And then Commander Root arrives, not with the entire army, as that very much over-bloated the second act, but rather with just a squad of elite elf cops. Then actually show that Artemis is a smart and manipulative kid by having him set up some mind games and traps to deduce which of the elves are actually Opal's spies. Then, once they're disposed of, have him team up with Commander Root, who brings in Mulch to seek out the hidden weapon. This is Mulch's only role in the story. Once they've found it, have him actually go to Opal's secret lair and confront her with the others, leading her into an ambush by showing her the weapon and luring her out. And while there, she reveals what she really looks like and why she wants humans dead. How about when she first became a scientist, she wanted to explore the human world, so she created a stealth suit to allow her to travel above ground, but one day, while exploring America, the suit glitched out in front of a human, who freaked out upon seeing a real-life fairy using magic and shot her in the face, leaving her with a grotesque wound that is finally shown to the audience. While she escaped, the fairies banned her from making any more cloaking devices, so she decided to work on a deadlier solution to allow her to finally take back the above ground. Then actually have an interesting final confrontation where the gang saves Artemis Sr. Now, I get that this wouldn't be perfect, but that's the best I could come up with in terms of what the movie, not the books, was giving me. And I'm sure people who have read the source material probably could come up with a better, more accurate adaptation. Is there a lesson to be learned from this movie? Well, a film with many problems will obviously teach us a lot of lessons. Don't have a terrible framing device if it's leading to your movie being severely underdeveloped. Don't shroud your villain in mystery if you aren't going to reveal anything. And if you're gonna adapt a beloved story, while some changes are understandable, changing things to the point where the story is completely unrecognisable, well, I have to ask, why even make an adaptation in the first place? And that, my friends, is exactly what went wrong. Thanks for watching the video. So, while I, as a non-book reader, didn't like this movie, I am especially interested to hear the thoughts of those who are fans of the books. Just how much did you hate this? Are there points here that I didn't make that you think should be mentioned? Because I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about here, but we'd be here all day. Like, share and subscribe and all that jazz, and I hope to speak to you all again soon. Goodbye.